Okay. Good afternoon, all. 3 p.m. and I'll call this meeting to order. Does anyone have a pecuniary interest from the committee? No? Then we'll proceed with the approval of the minutes from May 30th, 2024. Are there any corrections to the minutes?
I didn't see that.
Can I have a motion to approve the minutes, please?
I'll make a motion.
Seconder?
What are they?
All in favor? Motion carried. Our first order of business is an application for consent severance B-01 2024. It's for property owned by Point Edward Venetian Boulevard LP. Address at 1400 to 1460 Venetian Boulevard. The purpose of this consent application is to sever an existing 26,952 square meter lot into two lots of 18,671 square meters and 8,297 square meters. Approval of the consent application is conditional on approval of another minor variance application A-03-2024. Keep that in mind. Notices of this meeting have been circulated and owners in the area affected, as well as agencies. If we can have the staff report now, Mr. Jared Preston, could you take the floor?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, and members of the public. My name is Jared Preston, and I'm the planner for the County of Lambton as well as the Village of Point Edward. And today I'm doing my presentation on application A03-2024 and B01-2024. So. So I'm going to go through the minor variance application first. Go to the second slide. So the applicant's seeking 3 minor variances today for the property on 1400 and 1460 Venetian Boulevard. And so to be specific to everybody, this property consists of both the Best Western Hotel and the Holiday Inn Express that is currently on the property. The purpose of this application is to seek relief from development standards under the comprehensive zoning bylaw. It is subject to approval of the consent application as well to allow a severance between the Holiday Inn and the Best Western property. And the chart that I have on the next slide, it's just showing the required standard of what variances are required and then what they're proposing. So the first one has to do with the minimum side yard width. So the way the applicants had decided to split the property up, they would only have a 1.65 meter side yard width between the Holiday Inn building and the Best Western. And they're required to have at least 3 meters from the C2 zone. C2 zone requires 3 meters, they're proposing 1.65 meters. The next 2 variances that are required have to do with parking space requirements coming from section 4.28.1 of the zoning bylaw. So based on the calculations done for hotels, there was required 255 spaces required for the Best Western and 120 spaces for the Holiday Inn. For the Best Western, 142 spaces are being proposed or provided, and 115 spaces for the Holiday Inn proposed and provided. So I'm going to go next to the consent application. So that, as was mentioned before by the chair, the applicant is proposing to sever an existing 26,952 square meter lot containing the Holiday Inn and separate it from the Best Western. The proposed retained lot will be approximately 18,671 0.1 meters squared, and the proposed severed lot will be approximately 8,297.34 meters squared. Approval of this proposed consent application is also conditional on the minor variance application that I just discussed. So this is the site photos. The first one is just showing the front of the Holiday Inn property on 1460, and this site photo shows the front of the Best Western property. Next site photo shows a restaurant, the B&B Bar and Grill, that is attached to the Best Western property. This next photo shows the entrance into the back parking lot of the Holiday Inn and Best Western property. And this is where the setback comes in, the 1.65 from the nearest point of the Best Holiday Inn to the Best Western.
And I just want to clarify, it's the Best Western property line, not the hotel itself, not the building.
No,
It's
it's
a
a
setback from the property
line,
line.
yeah.
Just-
And then this is showing the Hampton Inn Hotel nearby, as you can see in the near distance, and this is part of the Holiday Inn rear parking as well. And this this site photo shows the rear parking lot in the Best Western. This is an aerial photo that was done up of the property. So as you can see highlighted in that light green color, you could see, and highlighted in yellow are the two different properties. So the 1400 is the Best Western and the 1460 is the Holiday Inn. Currently, they're both zoned C2 and they're all part of one property. So what's being proposed today is they're just being proposed to split. So the 1460, the Holiday Inn will be under one ownership, and then the 1400 will be under the other. This shows the minor variance proposal that's being proposed. So for the setback, it's showing the 1.65 meters between the property lines of the proposed property lines of the Holiday Inn and the Best Western. The parking space variances were included in the graphic. So that one I can't describe. This next one is showing the severance. So the one in the purple is the proposed severed lot, which is the Holiday Inn. So approximately 0.82 hectares, 2.04 acres. It comes approximately the same number as it would be in square meters if you converted them. And then the retained lot being the Best Western property. Again, convert that into square meters would be very similar. So upon review of we're going to start with the minor variance application first. Planning staff found that this proposal is consistent with the Planning Act, the provincial planning statement, county official plan, Point Edward official plan, and Point Edward zoning bylaw. This application meets all four tests of minor variance. So in regards to the minor side yard setback, the 1.65 meters, staff had no issues with that setback. It will continue to provide enough room for vehicles to get around the property to the rear parking spots behind the Best Western Holiday Inn, as it's currently been able to do that since the Holiday Inn property was built. The variance for the parking spaces should not cause issues, as there were no present issues with the parking, with the same amount of parking spots provided when they were under one ownership. There's no new expansion being proposed as of this moment, but the parking spaces would have to be reviewed if there was to be an expansion done to either property. Right now, we're just looking at it. It is presently.
No, that's not right.
If there's not gonna be any expansion, why are the reduction in parking spaces?
It's the I can go through the chair. The reason for the reduction in parking spots is because we're treating these properties right now as separate properties. So they have their own parking regulations that they have to follow for parking requirements. So the number becomes less because they are split. If they were the same under the same ownership, since they already had a minor variance back in 2018, they wouldn't have to get another one. But the reason for the reduction of parking is because they're being split, so I have to treat it as requirements for one hotel and the other one.
Okay.
So for the consent, The service proposal is consistent with all the applicable policies, planning act, provincial planning statement, county OP, Point Edward official plan, and Point Edward zoning bylaw. Both the severed and retained parcels meet the appropriate minimum lot size for the C2 zone. And then back in 2018, these applicants received permission from the community adjustment to reduce the number of parking spaces. And at that time, it was required 382, and they were allowed 258 spaces to facilitate the construction of the present Holiday Inn. Currently, both hotels under one ownership have been able to provide sufficient parking with the 258 spaces. And once under separate ownership, there'd be no reduction in the amount of spaces available for cars to park at either hotel, as those spaces are already provided. But a new calculation for parking requirements had to be done because we are separating the parcels. So I had to treat it as two separate parcels. So I'm gonna first start with the staff recommendation for the minor variance application. So upon review, County Langton Planning staff recommend that Point Edward Community of Adjustment approve minor variance application A03-2024 at 1400 to 1460 Venetian Boulevard. And then I'm just gonna read the consent one. And the second recommendation being that Point Edward Community of Adjustment approve consent application B01-2024 at 1400 to 1460 Venetian Boulevard with the following conditions. Now, these conditions are just standard conditions that the Village of Point Edward has for severances. So the first one being that the certificate of consent under section 5342 of the Planning Act shall be given within 2 years of the date of the notice of decision. The request for certificate of consent shall be accompanied by a written submission that details how each of the conditions of severance have been fulfilled. That if the conditions are not fulfilled in that 2-year period, the consent expires and there is no ability to be extended. The second condition being that if necessary, a draft reference plan be prepared by an Ontario land surveyor for the purposes of facilitating the transaction of this consent E01-2024, and that this plan be approved by the village prior to being deposited with the Land Registry Office. The reference plan shall be submitted in digital format and be geo-referenced. And the last condition being that the owner's solicitor provides a transfer and preparation to the village together with a deposited reference plan, if necessary, and a schedule describing the land to be transferred for the purposes of the issuance of a certificate of consent. Thank you for your time. If you have any questions, we'd answer.
Thank you, Jared. Those present or online, are there any questions for Jared? I have one then. One of those hotels is now going to have fewer parking spaces than rooms. Is that going to create a problem?
Through the chair, from review of the parking spaces, I didn't see that as an issue. Both hotels were operating as sharing parking spaces at the time. And there seemed to be no concern with that. So we only looked at it as an issue down the road if there were to be an expansion.
We know if they're going to continue the setup they have now where they can share parking spaces, even though it will be separate properties.
Through the chair, I'm gonna kick that question to David, who's online, and he'll be able to provide a clear explanation to their purpose.
Through you, Mr. Chair. I think I'm unmuted. To answer the question, there's going to be no changes made to the site. They are going to operate how they are designed today. The reason for the expansion is really purely for financing purposes. And so you could sell one off to another and for mortgage purposes. So that's why we have to do this, so that you can get money out of one property for the other property.
Thank you. The next step in this process was to ask if there's anyone who wants to speak in favor of the application. I presume that would be you.
That would be me, yes.
Can we not ask some questions
More than happy to answer.
of this?
Yes, that would follow after he speaks in favor of it, or would it not?
Well, we're still
In any case, let's
We're
open
still
it up
on
to
the
questions.
question period, aren't we?
I'm happy to
Cool.
answer questions.
Yeah, I want to ask you,
Go ahead.
how is it in 2018, you required a reduction in parking spots so that you could have the two buildings.
Mhm.
Now you have the two buildings and you're asking for a reduction in parking spots again.
There is 5 parking spaces that were not built on site. And there is no issue with those parking spaces. So we did a parking study back in 2018, which actually, yeah, okay. In 2018, which actually had the yield at 0.91 spaces per room. So we needed a much, much lower number. So that's why we didn't have to do a new parking study or anything like that, because those numbers hold true, that you would only require 0.91 spaces per room. If you want to know the real math, I could give it to you, but I can tell you that it basically there's 110 rooms in the Holiday Inn. You need 105. We're asking for 117 or something like that, or 115 parking spaces. We have more than we really require. We're just asking that so that because the lots are being divided, we're asking for there to be enough on one side, enough to be on the other side, and the math is basically where the property line basically has been drawn. So there is 5 parking spaces difference from our site plan approval. I think it's 5 or 6, but that's a minor number.
Well, my question is going to be the same as it was last time. When you have a big to-do at one restaurant and the other restaurant at the same time, you reduce the number of parking spots for the people there and the people in the rooms that can't all get in. That's assuming you're full there. There won't be enough parking.
But there is enough parking because
Banquet or something like that.
But that's why the parking study was done originally. So the parking is to be shared between the 2 lots. There's going to be no physical division between the lots. So they'll share wherever. To date, there hasn't been any issues, and it's been operational for 5 years, give or take. Right? No complaints made to the city that we can't find parking anywhere along those lines. So there shouldn't be any issues unless there's an expansion. Then it has to be relooked at, because then there's a change in use. But right now, the use isn't changing.
So I would assume your agreement with the new mortgage holder of the Holiday Inn is going to be in writing that you're going to share the parking spots forever and ever.
I have no idea what his is. I don't know what he's writing in the agreement. That wasn't the condition, but he probably will if he does sell it. So if he does decide to sell it off to somebody else to operate the hotel, that person may want a share parking agreement, but it hasn't been asked for.
But if we give you this variance for the Holiday Express or the Best Western, and new ownership comes in and you haven't got an agreement on shared parking,
But what's stopping somebody from sharing the parking? There's no physical barriers between the lots. Do you know what I mean? Like the drive lane goes into the lot. There's 2 drive lanes that go into the lots, right?
but it doesn't take long to put up a sign saying park it for clients of this hotel or that hotel only, you will be told.
Possibly. I can't speak up. Maybe. Regardless, we are providing
assuming
1-to-1.
I'm assuming it's not always going to be 2 compatible owners.
Sorry, do you
And
mind
then we're in
repeating?
a position of granting something that's not in perpetuity.
So what you're suggesting is that there's a shared parking arrangement between the 2?
Well, I think you should. And I think it should be compulsory before we grant a variance, an agreement to that anyway, before we grant a variance on parking there. And how many handicap spots have you got in there?
Well, apparently we're meeting the bylaws for both lots.
How many?
Let me look at the plans. Second here, let me look at the plan again. I don't remember the numbers off the top of my head. For accessible on the Holiday Inn, there is 3 accessible parking spaces provided. On the Best Western property, we have, I'm just looking at my numbers here. There is 5 provided on the Best Western,
Okay,
which apparently meets the municipal standards.
I'm done.
Are there any other questions from members of the committee?
Just a point of clarification, you're maintaining the status quo, is that correct?
Yes,
Okay, and so to sort of building or commenting on the question was asked about handicap spots, or you maintaining the same amount of?
yeah,
spots
we
that-
haven't reduced any of the parking. So what happened
Okay.
was is that why we're short 5 parking spaces, the light standards were installed in the wrong spot and the curb was built in the wrong way. It hasn't been an issue. So it's like, why rip it all out at the cost to get 5 parking spaces you don't even need, right? So,
Okay,
Might need it.
If I may, I
Yeah.
think when we make a decision, we have to deal with what has been requested on paper, not assumptions.
yeah.
Um,
Definitely.
Are there any other questions or comments from the committee?
No.
No? Okay, is there anyone speaking in opposition to the application? Here or online? Apparently not.
Were there any correspondence?
No, but
And that was my next question. Is there any correspondence to read? And there is not.
yeah, there's been none.
And are there any further comments? Or any questions, further questions from the committee members? Is committee prepared to make a decision at this time?
Sure.
Okay. Could someone make a motion, please?
I'll make a motion.
And what would you like the motion to be?
The variance, that the variance be approved with the condition.
Mhm. So there are no conditions on the variance, the conditions lie with the severance.
Or the severance, okay,
Okay,
with the severance. And I guess there's no restrictions, it's all covered. We allow the parking reduction.
Okay.
There,
if I may, there's been discussion about a parking agreement. Is that something you would like to put in as a condition of there be an agreement registered on title that allows for shared parking between the 2 facilities?
well, that's a good idea. Whoever had it.
It's been mentioned by a few different people
Yeah,
at different times, so.
Would you like that included in your motion?
yeah, I even include that in my motion.
Thank you.
Now, the wording I'll leave to Jim.
Yeah.
He's got the
We have
gist
a
of it.
seconder for the motion, please.
I'll second the motion.
Is there any further discussion?
Good luck.
So, we will need a separate motion on one for the minor variance, one for the severance.
Oh, do we?
So, yeah, well, I mean, I guess you can move both if you wish, but just to keep it clean, it'd be nice to have.
You got the numbers for each variant
Yes,
or
Yeah.
there,
so your motion will be for the severance
yeah,
and.
and
No, that's fine. We're wondering how to pull that off because we've got 2 separate requests here
Mhm.
and we do need to deal with them separately.
Right,
So,
we've kind of discussed them collectively, but when it comes time to,
and Jared addressed both thoroughly at the
okay,
same time. So,
so you need a second motion, do you?
well, vote on the first one first.
Okay,
okay, now I've lost my,
So you got a mover and a seconder on this is backwards actually, so we did the severance first. So
yeah,
we've got a mover and a seconder on the severance. And we just need to ask all in favor.
okay. All in favor of the motion, please?
what it was.
Motion carried.
And then we need a motion to approve the minor variance.
Yes. And could I have a motion to approve minor variance A-03-2024 which is impacted by the, no, it's not impacted, but actually dealt with,
Right, yeah, it covers the variance for parking.
yeah. So could I have a motion on, A-03-2024, please?
I'll make the motion.
Could I have a seconder?
I'll second the motion.
All in favor?
No. Can you read the motion back?
The motion will read that minor variance application B03 of 2024 be approved as circulated.
Thank you.
Okay, we voted for that, so motion carries. Okay, appeals. Let me check this.
I think it's approved.
Due to provincial law,
I'm like,
Just change.
that is a change, okay. Appeals may be made to the local planning and appeal tribunal against the decision of this committee within the prescribed time frame. If you wish to be notified of the decision of the Committee of Adjustment in respect to the proposed minor variance, you must provide a written request. Is there any new business to bring up?
thank you, gentlemen. Have a happy Halloween.
Thank you.
If I may,
Yes,
I'd just like to let the committee know that the advertisement's gone out. This committee's date of appointment ends at the end of this year. And we are sent out looking for applications for the next 2-year term. And those applications are due sometime in November. So just letting people know that if you wish to apply and you're a sitting committee member, just an email outlining your wishes would be sufficient to apply for the next term.
thank you very much. May I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
I will. Anyone else putting their hand up?
And could I have a seconder, please?
I'll second it.
All in favor?